As I walked down the apartment hallway, tired from work, suddenly someone from the neighboring apartment grabbed my arm. Confused and scared, I screamed as I was dragged inside. It was my neighbor, Mr. Johnson, who apologized, claiming he had no choice. Suspicious, I pulled away, demanding an explanation. He nervously said, "Actually, my name is Luna. Now, let me tell you about my life. I'm 24, working in a well-known trading company. I enjoy the freedom of living alone in a city apartment, earning my own money. I grew up with a single mom who struggled to provide, but she never gave me an allowance. Despite her reasonable income, she was labeled a toxic parent. I moved out to escape her control, and I'll share our story. I was born and raised in a town near New York City. My childhood home was remote, making life difficult without a car or bus. Raised by my single mom, I should be grateful, but her restrictions created resentment. In elementary school, I asked for an allowance, but she refused, claiming money could lead to trouble. Despite promises, she never bought what I wanted. Birthdays were filled with disappointing educational books, and I realized my mom was different from my friends' parents. Every day, I desperately tried to find a way to escape my parents' control. Through middle and high school, it only intensified. Not only did I not get an allowance, but I also had to report and get permission for everything, whether it was hanging out with friends or going on dates. Once, after sneaking out to meet my boyfriend, I faced my mother's furious reaction the next morning. She declared that I would go without meals for the next 3 days. Without an allowance, I couldn't even buy food outside. Too embarrassed to let my friends or boyfriend know about my toxic mom, I couldn't ask them for something as simple as a snack. After 3 days of hunger, my concerned boyfriend approached me, asking if I was okay. Unable to hold back my tears, I'd opened up about my mother. I still remember the shock on his face. Although he sympathized at first, he began avoiding me afterward. 2 weeks later, I overheard him telling his friends that my mom seemed like a real problem, and he didn't want to deal with it. He thought I was desperate and kind of scary. Hearing him talk like that made me realize he felt bothered by my toxic mom, not wanting to protect me but feeling alienated. Overwhelmed with frustration and tears, I quietly slipped away to a corner of the hallway, realizing it was over with him still having feelings for him. I had to abruptly end my love for him, filled with anger towards my mom. When I got home, I lashed out at her, questioning why she had to control me. I blamed her for my boyfriend leaving, and my friends distancing themselves because of her abnormal behavior. Frustrated, I vented at her, only to find her pleased that my relationship had ended. Her self-indulgent response deepened my despair. My mother couldn't understand my feelings, and her sense of righteousness ignored common sense. Controlling my life was her reason for living. Feeling dizzy and unable to contain myself, I rushed to my room. Closing the door, I cried, wishing for a lock that my mother, who enjoyed controlling me, would never allow. My mother's concerned voice interrupted, asking if I was eating dinner. Her words weighed heavy on my chest. After high school, determined to live alone, I vowed to become a college student. I channeled my frustration into studying for exams as revenge. I secretly started a part-time job, faking my mother's signature. Gradually, I earned scholarships and slipped into the acceptance range of a New York public university. When I finally told my mother about my achievements, she smiled sweetly, praising my hard work. However, her reference to University, a nearby public university, signaled that I wouldn't be allowed to live on my own. It was just a 20-minute commute from home. Despite choosing a university within New York, my mother insisted on a different one in a neighboring town. This left me feeling uneasy, as she continued trying to control me even as I was about to become a college student. Rejecting the idea of University, I expressed my desire for our chosen university. In response, my mother sternly dismissed it, insisting on University and questioning my chances of getting in. Frustrated and unable to hold back tears, I turned away from my mother and rushed to my room. Even as a college student, I couldn't escape her control. Balancing exams and part-time work was tough. And despite my efforts, it all seemed unnecessary. The frustration affected my sleep, leading me to take the entrance exam for M University, getting in as expected. Before I knew it, I was a college student, and my mother surprised me with a smartphone as a celebration gift. It was a remarkable shift from her previous controlling behavior. With the smartphone, I felt liberated, like a fish in water, thoroughly enjoying college life. Making new friends and engaging in normal communication, I also focused on my future, participating in student organizations and volunteer activities. Rather than joining clubs or sports teams, I applied what I learned to secure a position at the most famous trading company in the States, located in New York. Finally, as a working adult, I got to live on my own. My mother congratulated me on my job, presenting me with a $2,000 wallet as a gift. Over the past few years, her control over me had considerably loosened. Despite past resentment, I genuinely thanked her for everything as I began living apart from her. In the end, I decided to express my gratitude, and my mother's response was, "It's nothing. Just take care and do your best." Despite her recent change in attitude, I didn't question why she was so willing to let me go. Looking back, I should have been more suspicious, understanding that my mother wouldn't easily let me go. Nevertheless, I ended up living alone in a town near the center of New York City. The rent was high, but my company's housing allowance made my personal expenses around $600 a month. The apartment building wasn't large, and I would recognize the faces of fellow residents. I lived in a corner room on the third floor, and next door lived a man named Johnson. While we exchanged greetings, our interactions were limited. Johnson seemed about 5 years older, with a slender build and a kind appearance. In New York, neighborly interactions are usually indifferent, so beyond a simple hello, I rarely spoke with Johnson. Fortunately, he didn't seem like a strange person. I kept my apartment secret from my mother, as I didn't want her showing up unannounced. When she asked about my address, I simply said, "I'll be back soon," and left it at that. She seemed a bit down but accepted it, saying, "Well, that's fine." Despite being focused on my work computer, my mother frequently called or texted me. During work, I received calls that interrupted my concentration, leading to irritation. The demanding job at the trading company, coupled with my mother's constant calls, made the situation challenging. Not just calls, but she kept sending messages, resulting in a flood of unread notifications. A chill ran down my spine, and a concerned colleague noticed my strained expression. I reassured them, "It's nothing," and managed to maintain composure, continuing my work. 2 years passed in this manner, and at the age of 24, my second-year salary was remarkably high. Earning money independently brought me deep joy. Gradually, I became more engrossed in work, increasingly ignoring calls from my mother. Since she didn't know where I lived, there was no chance of running into her unless I went home. The image of my mother slowly faded from my life, and I finally felt like I was living my own life. One day, after drinks with colleagues, I was tipsier than usual on my way home. Around 10 p.m., as I reached the third floor of my apartment building, I staggered towards my corner room, mumbling about another long day at work. Suddenly, a man's voice called out, "Luna, over here for a sec." I felt someone grab my arm from the next-door apartment entrance. In a moment of confusion, I screamed and was dragged inside. Furious, I shouted, "What on earth are you doing? I'm going to call the cops." My neighbor, Mr. Johnson, apologized, claiming he had no other choice. Suspicious, I shook off his grip and accused him of planning something. In the midst of my panic, Mr. Johnson urged me to calm down. However, his next words made me shudder. "I saw someone break into your apartment." Although I immediately thought it might be a trap, Johnson looked serious. Unfamiliar with such situations, I was more afraid of him than anything and tried to escape. Startled by his intense tone, I hesitated, and he urgently pleaded for me to wait, emphasizing the danger outside. At a crossroads and unsure whether to believe him, I saw desperation in Johnson's eyes. Though we had barely spoken, his eyes seemed direct and sincere. It was just a hunch, but I felt inclined to listen to him. Trembling, I asked about the break-in details, and Johnson began to explain. I couldn't see clearly, but the person wore all black, with long sleeves and pants, looking suspicious. I'd seen someone similar around the apartment complex before, thinking they were just another resident. About 3 hours ago, when I came home, I saw that person entering your apartment, and that's when I thought something was off. It's 10 p.m. now, so around 7 o'clock p.m. Wearing all black clothes in July isn't comfortable. However, the key issue is how someone could enter my house without having a key. Initially, I thought it might be a friend or your boyfriend, Luna, so I didn't pay much attention. However, when I heard you coming home just a while ago, I got shocked. Even if they were a friend or boyfriend, staying alone in someone else's home for 3 hours seems strange. It hit me that this person could be dangerous, so I decided to stop you. Mr. Johnson's words made me tremble violently. If what he was saying was true, the intruder might still be hiding in my apartment. I haven't given my keys to anyone, don't have a boyfriend, and haven't made plans with any friends, ever since a harsh experience with a boyfriend in high school. I've avoided dating men, so I currently don't have a romantic partner or close friends nearby. Who could be breaking into my home? Luna, please calm down and listen. Have you been stalked by anyone recently? Johnson asked, trying to soothe my agitation. Stalked? No, nothing like that. I had no recollection of such a thing, but it was possible someone was stalking me without my knowledge. Maybe you just haven't noticed, but the perpetrator could have been acting this way for a while. Is there anyone, perhaps a romantic partner, with whom you had a falling out or argument? When Mr. Johnson asked me that, I thought about the men around me. Since a high school incident, I've been afraid to get involved with men, and I hadn't had any such relationships with my work colleagues. No, there's no one. I've been avoiding such things all this time. I couldn't think of anyone who might be the intruder. It seemed the only option left was to contact the police, but having never called 911 in my life, I hesitated to make the report. After all, the claim of an intruder in my house was solely based on Johnson's word. Should I really trust what this man is saying? I stared at my phone's call button, unable to press it, and impatiently, Johnson said he'd call the police. Just then, the doorbell rang, startling me, and I accidentally dropped my phone. Wondering who it could be at this time, I peeked through the peephole of Johnson's apartment door. Seeing the person in black clothes outside left me speechless. Mr. Johnson's voice was trembling too. He must be scared as well. Trying to steady my shaking body, I answered, "It's my mother." To Mr. Johnson, my response might have seemed anticlimactic. However, the fact that my mother was standing in front of Johnson's door next to my apartment brought an unbelievable amount of fear. "What's going on?" Mr. Johnson's voice trembled as well. "Could it be that the person I mistook for a stalker was your mother? If so, I'm really sorry. That's a huge misunderstanding. I apologize." Mr. Johnson apologized to me, but I shook my head. "No, it's not that. It's just that." I hesitated to tell Johnson that my mother was toxic and that I hadn't even given her the address of this apartment. Before I could, my mother banged on the door, saying, "Hello, excuse me. I think my daughter is in there. Could she come out, please?" My mother's loud voice echoed in the hallway, making me jump. How did she know where I live? And how did she know I was here? I flung open the door, and my mother said, "Oh, Luna, finally found you. I've been trying to contact you, but you've been ignoring me. I just wanted to see you so badly. I came here. Aren't you coming home yet?" Seeing my mother standing there as if it were the most natural thing made me feel nauseous. "Mom, how did you know where I live? And how did you know I was here?" I had so many questions, dressed all in black, just like Johnson described, like a stalker. And how did she know where my house and whereabouts were? Why was she sneaking around behind my back? Well, that's easy. I put GPS trackers in that smartphone and wallet. I was shocked by my mother's revelation. The smartphone and wallet were gifts for my mother for special occasions. I had been using the same smartphone for about 6 years, which means I've been monitored by my mother all this time. A chill ran down my spine, and I swallowed hard. At first, it was just a smartphone, but you sometimes leave it at home, right? So I thought if I put GPS trackers in both the phone and the wallet, you'd always have one with you. You're my precious daughter, Luna. I've always been worried about you, thinking what if something dangerous happened. Watching my mother speak so nonchalantly, I completely lost my composure. I thought that becoming a working adult meant I had finally gained true freedom, earning my own money, doing what I wanted when I wanted. I thought I could enjoy such basic freedoms that everyone else takes for granted. But it turned out I was just dancing in the palm of my mother's hand all along. If this continues, my life will forever be controlled by my mother. I can't stand that. I was done having my life thrown into disarray by my mother. Mom. I called out to her in a very calm voice. My mother responded in her usual clueless tone. Yes, what is it? I'm never going back home again, Mom. Whenever I'm with you, I feel like I'm always being restrained. It's always been like that, hasn't it? You call me your precious daughter, your beloved daughter, but you've stifled everything I wanted to do. You neatly clipped my wings every time I tried to spread them, using worry as a plausible excuse. Each time, it hurt me deeply and caused me great pain. I am not your possession, Mom. I have my own will as a person, and I don't want it to be tainted by anyone else. So, Mom, let's cut ties. Please don't ever contact me again or come to see me. In a final outburst, I shouted all my feelings at her. My mother, hearing my declaration of cutting ties for the first time, visibly paled. She must have been shocked to be defied like this, always assuming I would comply with her cutting ties. What? Why, I'm your mother, Luna. Look, I didn't come today to restrain you. That's right. I just thought of borrowing some money from you. That's all I came for. My mother, now in disarray, suddenly claimed she wanted to borrow money, which made no sense. Money? What are you talking about, Mom? Are you in debt? Were you planning to steal money from your daughter, who earns a lot? You never intended to borrow, did you? You sneaked into my apartment to steal money, right? Everything clicked about why she had been in my apartment for 3 hours. If she really wanted to see me, she would have called or texted. But there was no contact from her today. She must have planned to steal from me and then see me afterward. But I don't keep cash at home. My bank books are hidden where they can't be easily found. Frustrated that she couldn't fulfill her intention to steal, she just wanted to satisfy her desire to see me and came next door. Thinking this, I felt disgusted, even considering her as my mother. No, I just wanted to borrow a little. My mother, used to such confrontations, began to panic. I couldn't trust a single word she said anymore. Gathering all my strength, I yelled at her again, enough. A person who tries to steal from her own daughter is not a mother. Never show your face to me again. I'm canceling my phone. Goodbye. Ignoring my mother's wide-eyed expression, I forcefully shut Johnson's door. For a while, she kept shouting, Luna, I'm sorry. Please open the door. It seemed the neighbors found the commotion suspicious and called the police. I heard the sirens of a patrol car and my mother arguing with the police in the hallway. The police managed to take her out of the building. Exhausted, I slumped to the ground. Are you okay? Mr. Johnson asked, looking at me with concern. I'm sorry for involving you in a family fight because of my mother. No, it's okay. Just rest for today. Thankful for Mr. Johnson's kindness, I returned to my room and crawled into bed. I decided to sleep without thinking about anything. My consciousness slowly faded into darkness. As for what happened afterward, I separated my family register from my mother's to create some distance. Though legally I couldn't cut ties completely with my biological parent, having my name removed from her family register made me feel like I had escaped her control, and I felt a sense of relief. Furthermore, I threw away the smartphone and wallet my mother gave me, replaced them with new ones, and moved to a different apartment. Of course, I haven't shared my new phone number with my mother. Now she won't be able to pinpoint my whereabouts. After that incident at my apartment, my mother, who had received a stern warning from the police for causing a disturbance, apparently became reclusive. As she confessed, after I left home and started working, She indulged in high-end brands of clothes and bags to distract herself from loneliness, accumulating considerable debt. Eventually, she ran out of living expenses and resorted to borrowing from high-end lenders. She is now troubled daily by debt collectors. However, I couldn't bring myself to help her. The fact that she had controlled and monitored me, even using GPS, is a shocking event that I can never forgive and is etched in my heart. If cutting ties with her serves as a punishment for her, so be it. I plan to live in a world without my mother. Even after moving to my new apartment, I kept in touch with Johnson, my former neighbor. Initially, I reached out to thank him, but he continued to stay in contact, and now we even go out for meals together. Having refused romantic relationships with men for a long time, escaping from my mother's control has made me more open to love. If things go well with Johnson, it would ironically be thanks to my mother. But I want to build a bright future with Mr. Johnson away from my mother's knowledge.
I was having my morning coffee when I opened the envelope from Beverly Hills Cosmetic Surgery Center. For a moment, I thought it was junk mail, some marketing ploy targeting women my age. Then I saw my name at the top of a $40,000 medical bill for breast augmentation surgery I'd never had. My hands shook as I read through the itemized charges: surgeon fees, anesthesia, post-operative care, premium silicone implants. All performed on someone using my name, my social security number, my insurance information. I called the surgery center immediately. "This is Gabriela Santos. I received a bill for surgery I never had. Let me check your file, Miss Santos." The receptionist paused. "It shows here that you had breast augmentation surgery 3 weeks ago. Dr. Richardson performed the procedure. I've never been to your facility. Someone used my identity." "Ma'am, that's impossible. We require photo identification and insurance verification." Then someone forged my ID. Another pause. "Would you like to speak with our billing department about a payment plan?" "I want to speak with your fraud department now." After being transferred 3 times, I finally reached someone who understood the gravity of what I was saying. They agreed to pull the file and review the documentation. "Miss Santos, the patient who came in did have identification with your name and information. But now that I'm looking more closely at the photos in our system." "What photos?" "We take before and after photos for all procedures. The woman in these photos, she doesn't look like the photo on the ID she provided." My stomach dropped. "Can you describe her?" "Blonde hair, about 5'6", probably early 30s. Very theatrical makeup." That description fit exactly one person. My sister Veronica. I hung up and immediately called her. "Ronnie, we need to talk. Now." "Oh hey Gavs. What's up?" "What's up is that I just received a $40,000 bill for breast implants. Want to explain that?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "Ronnie, look, I can explain. You better start explaining fast. I was going to pay it back. It's not like you were using your good credit anyway." I sat down hard in my kitchen chair. "Are you insane? You stole my identity to get plastic surgery. I didn't steal anything. We're sisters. What's yours is mine, right?" "No, Veronica, what's mine is mine. And what you did is called identity theft. It's a felony." "Don't be so dramatic. I needed this surgery, Gabs. My self-esteem was in the toilet after Direct left me. I couldn't afford it on my own, and your credit is so much better than mine. So you forged my identification and stole my personal information." "I borrowed it. There's a difference." There was no difference, and we both knew it. But Veronica had always lived in a world where her problems became everyone else's responsibility. "I'm hanging up now, and I'm calling the police." "Wait. Don't do anything crazy. Let's talk to Mom first." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet at our mother's house. I needed to understand how deep this betrayal went, and whether other family members were involved. Mom greeted me at the door with a guilty expression that told me everything I needed to know. "Gabriela, honey, before you say anything, you knew. Veronica needed help. She was so depressed after her divorce. So you helped her commit identity theft?" "I helped her get the confidence boost she needed to move on with her life." I walked into the living room where Veronica sat on the couch, noticeably different from the last time I'd seen her. Her new figure was obvious, and she seemed to be deliberately showing it off. "Do you like them?" she asked, gesturing at her chest. Dr. Richardson is amazing. I feel like a whole new person. You feel like a new person because you literally stole someone else's identity to become one. Mom sat down next to Veronica, immediately taking her side. Gabriella, you're being unreasonable. Veronica needed this surgery for her mental health. Her mental health doesn't justify destroying my financial health. You don't even use credit. You rent that tiny apartment. You don't have a car payment. You don't buy anything nice for yourself. Because I'm saving money, Mom. Because I'm planning for my future. Well, now you can plan around helping your sister. I stared at both of them, realizing that this conversation was pointless. They genuinely believed that my financial stability was a family resource that Veronica could tap into whenever she needed a confidence boost. I'm pressing charges, I said quietly. Both of them started talking at once, but I held up my hand. Veronica used my name, my social security number, and forged my identification to obtain $40,000 in medical services. That's not family helping family. That's identity theft, credit fraud, and forgery. She needed confidence more than you need credit, Mom said. Like that settled the matter. No, I replied. She needed therapy more than she needed surgery, and I need my identity back. I left them sitting there and drove straight to the police station. Detective Maria Reyes took my statement and reviewed the evidence I gathered, the forged ID, the medical bills, and even the recordings where Veronica admitted to using my information. This is a clear case of identity theft, Detective Reyes said. The medical component makes it even more serious. How did she access your personal details? We're sisters. She's known my social security number, birth date, everything since we were kids. And the ID. She probably used an old photo of me to have a fake one made. We look alike enough that it would work. Miss Santos, I have to ask, are you certain you want to press charges? This could lead to felony charges. I'm sure. The next few days were overwhelming. Veronica was arrested at her apartment. The story made local news because of how unusual the case was. Woman arrested for using sister's identity for cosmetic surgery ran across several headlines. My phone lit up with calls from friends, extended family, even strangers. Most of the family calls weren't supportive. Gabriella, how could you do this to your sister? Aunt Carmen asked, upset. I didn't do anything to her. She did this to me. But now her future is at risk. She should have thought of that before damaging mine. It's just money. Family comes first. It's not just money, it's my credit, my identity, my trust. Cousin Rita tried a gentler approach. Can't you just pay the bill and move on? Veronica said she'll pay you back. With what? She couldn't afford it to begin with. That's why she used my name. But she's really confident now. You should see her smile. Then she can smile in court. Despite the pressure, I stood my ground. I'd already disputed the fraudulent charges, contacted my insurance, and hired a lawyer to help me sort out the damage. What I didn't expect was how fast the story would spread on social media. Someone had filmed the arrest, and the video went viral online. The comment sections were full of shock and judgment. But then something surprising happened. Other women began sharing their stories about parents, siblings, and spouses who had stolen their financial identities. My sister used my credit to fund her wedding while I was deployed overseas. My mom opened cards in my name when I was a teenager. My brother bought a motorcycle in my name, then called me dramatic when I confronted him. Suddenly, my situation wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a broader conversation about financial betrayal in families and the silence victims are pressured into keeping. A victims advocacy group contacted me about speaking at a conference. A national credit service asked to use my case as a learning tool. 3 law firms offer free legal help to pursue civil claims against both Veronica and the clinic that approved the surgery. Meanwhile, Veronica was facing real legal consequences. She was charged with identity theft, credit fraud, and forgery, serious charges that carried the risk of years in prison. Her lawyer called me personally. Miss Santos, my client is open to a plea deal. She'll accept guilt if you'll agree to a reduced sentence. What does reduced mean? Probation, community service, and repayment, including legal costs and credit monitoring. I paused just long enough to be polite. No deal. You don't want your sister to go to prison, do you? I want her to be accountable. She made choices that hurt me deeply. She doesn't get to walk away from that without consequences. The trial lasted 2 days. Veronica's defense was that she was emotionally fragile after her divorce and didn't understand the seriousness of what she was doing. The prosecution presented evidence that she'd researched the surgery center for months, had fake identification professionally made, practiced forging my signature, and had even created fake pay stubs to support the loan application. This wasn't an impulsive decision born of emotional distress. This was a calculated fraud scheme. Veronica was convicted on all 3 felony counts and sentenced to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation and an order to pay full restitution. The cosmetic surgery center was also investigated and fined for failing to properly verify patient identity, which led to them implementing new security protocols. During Veronica's sentencing, she was allowed to make a statement. She looked directly at me and said, "I hope you're happy now. You destroy your own sister over money." I was allowed to respond with a victim impact statement. "Your Honor, this case was never about money. It was about identity, trust, and respect. My sister didn't just steal my credit. She stole my sense of security and safety within my own family. She violated my privacy, my autonomy, and my future financial stability for her own vanity." I paused, looking at Veronica. I didn't destroy my sister. She destroyed herself by choosing to commit crimes instead of addressing her problems through legal and healthy means. The judge agreed. Ms. Veronica Santos, identity theft is not a family matter. It's a serious crime that destroys victims' lives and financial futures. The fact that you targeted your own sister makes this crime more egregious, not less. 2 years later, Veronica was released from prison. She called me on the day she got out. "Gabs, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I need you to know something." "What?" "Prison was the best thing that could have happened to me. Not because of the punishment, but because it forced me to face who I'd become. I got therapy, real therapy. I learned about narcissistic personality disorder, about financial abuse, about taking responsibility for my actions. I was quiet for a moment, and I'm sorry, really, truly sorry. Not sorry I got caught. Sorry I did it in the first place. Sorry I violated your trust and privacy. Sorry I put my vanity ahead of your financial security. Thank you for saying that. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm paying back every penny. I have a job now, a real job, and every spare dollar goes toward restitution. I know, I've been getting the payments. Is there any chance, maybe someday, we could try to rebuild some kind of relationship? I know it would take time, and I know I'd have to prove myself." I thought about the woman who'd stolen my identity for breast implants, who'd shown them off while I was discovering the financial wreckage she'd left behind. Then I thought about the sister I'd grown up with, before the divorce, before the depression, before the narcissism took over completely. "Maybe," I said, "but it would have to be on my terms, at my pace." "I understand, and Gabs, thank you for not letting me get away with it. I needed consequences to change." 5 years later, Veronica and I have a cautious but genuine relationship. She finished paying restitution 2 years early and now works as a counselor for women struggling with post-divorce depression and financial crimes. She kept the breast implants. Removing them would have been another unnecessary medical expense. But she always tells her story honestly when people ask about them. "I committed felonies to get these," she says. "They cost me my relationship with my sister, 18 months of my life, and my financial future. Worst investment I ever made." As for me, my credit was fully restored, and I used the experience to become an advocate for victims of family financial crimes. I speak at conferences, work with law enforcement, and help other people understand that protecting yourself from criminal family members isn't betrayal, it's survival. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst behavior, even when they're family, especially when they're family.
My dad's between jobs. My son Marcus mumbled at career day, his voice barely reaching the third row where I sat, invisible among the other parents. The Thomas Whitfield, who once commanded boardrooms and closed billion-dollar deals, was now just another face in the crowd. Exactly how my ex-wife and her new husband wanted it. But as Principal Morrison leaned into the microphone with a knowing smile, I realized some secrets are too big to stay buried, even when your own son has been taught to be ashamed of you. The gymnasium was packed with 11-year-olds and their career day presenters, doctors, lawyers, tech executives, all in their pressed suits and practiced smiles. I sat in my faded jeans and the last designer shirt that still fit properly, watching Marcus shrink smaller with each successful parent's presentation. His stepfather, Richard Hazen, had just finished a flashy talk about real estate development, complete with a PowerPoint showing his waterfront properties. Next up, we have Marcus Whitfield, Mrs. Chen announced. Marcus, would you like to tell us about your parents' careers? Marcus walked to the front like he was heading to his execution. His eyes darted to where his mother sat in the front row, her perfect highlights catching the light, Richard's arm draped possessively over her shoulder. Then his gaze found me in the back, and something in his face crumbled. My mom works in fashion marketing, he started, his voice stronger when talking about her. She runs campaigns for luxury brands. And my stepdad. He gestured to Richard, who preened. He develops shopping centers and hotels. And your father? Mrs. Chen prompted gently. The silence stretched. I could feel every eye in the room waiting. My ex-wife, Serena, turned slightly, shooting me a look that said, "Don't you dare make a scene." As if I was the one who'd spent 3 years telling our son that his father was a failure who couldn't hold down a job. My dad's, between jobs, Marcus finally said, the words falling like stones in still water. He's been looking for work. A few parents shifted uncomfortably. Someone's mother whispered to another. I saw Richard's satisfied smirk, the same one he'd worn when the judge granted him permission to have Marcus call him dad at home. The same one from when he convinced Serena that my instability meant I should only get weekend visits. Principal Morrison stood up from her chair on the stage, her movement drawing attention. She was a small woman, but something in her bearing commanded the room. Actually, she said, walking to the microphone, I think there's been a misunderstanding. The whispering stopped. Marcus looked confused, frozen at the podium. Mr. Whitfield, Principal Morrison said, looking directly at me, would you mind standing up? 200 heads swiveled to the back row. I stood slowly, my heart hammering but my face calm. This wasn't how I planned any of this. Parents and students, the principal continued, her voice carrying clearly, I need to share something. This morning, our school received the largest single donation in its 75-year history. $40 million for a new science wing, complete with state-of-the-art laboratories, a planetarium, and a greenhouse for our environmental studies program. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Serena's perfectly lined lips parted in shock. The donor requested anonymity. Principal Morrison said, but given the circumstances, and with his permission. She looked at me questioningly. I gave the slightest nod. The donation came from Mr. Thomas Whitfield, Marcus's father. The gymnasium erupted. The $40 million wing. A parent near me gasped. That's more than the school's entire endowment. Marcus stood at the podium, his mouth open, eyes wide. Dad, he said into the microphone, his voice cracking. You donated $40 million. I walked down the center aisle, every eye tracking my movement. Serena had gone pale under her spray tan. Richard's smirk had vanished, replaced by something that looked like he'd swallowed a wasp. Surprise, buddy, I said softly as I reached the front, winking at my son. I've been between jobs because I sold my company 6 months ago. Turns out the artificial intelligence platform I spent 10 years building was worth quite a bit. Quite a bit? Principal Morrison interjected with a laugh. Parents, Mr. Whitfield's company, Neuralink Solutions, sold to Microsoft for $2.3 billion. It was all over the financial news, though he used his company name, not his personal one. The room exploded again. Phones came out, fingers flying across screens, looking up the sale. The whispers turned to excited chatter. But Mom said, Marcus started, then stopped, his face flushing red. She said you couldn't even pay child support on time. That you were living in some tiny apartment because you couldn't afford better. I kept my voice gentle, aware of our audience but focused only on my son. The apartment is temporary, while my new house is being built. As for child support, your mom asked me to pay her directly instead of through the court. I have every receipt." Serena stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. "This is highly inappropriate," she said, her marketing voice trying to take control of the narrative. "We shouldn't be discussing private family matters." "You're right," I agreed calmly. "Which is why I never mentioned it. But when my son stands up and tells his class he's ashamed of his unemployed father, when I've built something that will revolutionize how we interact with technology, well, that seems like a good time for the truth." "Dad," Marcus said, his voice small, "you really sold the company for billions, but you never said anything. You never—" His voice trailed off, and I could see him piecing together 3 years of contradictions. The weekend visits where I lived simply but never complained about money. The times I'd offered to pay for his activities only to have his mother insist Richard would handle it. The coding lessons I'd given him on my old laptop that he now realized was cutting-edge tech. "I didn't build my company to brag about it," I said. "I built it because I believed in the technology. The money was just a byproduct. But you know what matters more than any of that?" He shook his head, tears starting to form in his eyes. "You matter more," I said. "You've always mattered more. Every line of code I wrote, every late night, every breakthrough. It was all so I could build something that would make your future better. The science wing isn't about showing off. It's about making sure you and every kid in this school has access to the tools that will shape tomorrow." "The dedication ceremony is next month," Principal Morrison added. "We were hoping Marcus might cut the ribbon, since the wing will be named the Marcus Whitfield Center for Scientific Innovation." That did it. Marcus launched himself at me, wrapping his arms around my waist and sobbing. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry," Mom said. Richard said, "But you were always there, weren't you? Every weekend you were there." I held my son, feeling 3 years of forced distance collapse. Over his head, I saw Serena's face cycle through emotions: shock, anger, calculation, and finally, something that might have been regret. Richard, meanwhile, looked like someone had revealed his entire real estate empire was built on sand. Which, even what I knew about his leveraged deals and the coming market correction, wasn't far from the truth. But that was karma for another day. "Mr. Whitfield," a parent called out, "are you the same Thomas Whitfield who just partnered with the Gates Foundation on global education initiatives?" Before I could answer, another voice: "My company tried to license your predictive algorithm technology. We couldn't even get a meeting." The questions came faster now, and I realized something had shifted. The invisible dad in the back row had become the center of gravity in the room. But more importantly, Marcus was looking at me with something I hadn't seen in 3 years: pride. "Perhaps," Principal Morrison suggested, "Mr. Whitfield would be willing to give an impromptu presentation. I know our students would love to hear about building a technology company from scratch." I looked down at Marcus, who nodded eagerly. "Would you help me?" I asked him. "You know more about the technical side than most people realize. All those coding sessions weren't just for fun." His face lit up. "Really? But I'm just learning." "The best learners make the best teachers," I said, guiding him back to the podium. "Besides, you helped me debug the neural network problem last month, remember? That was for your billion-dollar company." His voice squeaked. "I helped with actual AI code." As we set up for an impromptu presentation, I caught Serena trying to slip out with Richard. "Serena," I called out, my voice carrying just enough to make her stop. "You'll want to check your email. My lawyer sent over a revision to the custody arrangement. Given that I'm no longer unemployed and unstable, we'll need to revisit Marcus's living situation." She turned, her perfectly composed face cracking. "You can't just." "I can," I said simply. "And I will. Marcus deserves to know his father, not the fictional failure you and Richard invented. But we can discuss that later. Right now, I have a presentation to give with my son." As I turned back to Marcus, I heard Richard hiss to Serena, "You told me he was nobody, a failed programmer living off his parents." "I thought he was," she hissed back. "But I was done caring what they thought." Marcus was pulling up the presentation software, his earlier shame transformed into excitement. "Dad, can we show them the prototype? The one that responds to thoughts?" "That's still in beta," I laughed. "But sure, why not? Just remember, we can't reveal everything. Some secrets are worth keeping until the right moment." He grinned, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw myself in his smile. Not the defeated man Serena had painted me as, not the absent father Richard tried to replace, but the real me, the one who'd never stopped fighting for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus announced, his voice strong now, proud, "my dad is Thomas Whitfield, founder of Neuralink Solutions, and he's about to show you the future." As I began to speak, sharing the journey from a garage startup to a multi-billion-dollar exit, I noticed something beautiful. Marcus stood beside me, adding details, explaining concepts he'd learned during our weekends together. Every now and then, he'd look up at me with such pure admiration that it made every lonely night, every missed holiday because of the custody arrangement, every moment of forced silence worth it. The presentation went on for 30 minutes, with engaged questions from students and parents alike. By the end, Marcus was fielding technical questions with confidence, and I realized that while I'd built an ad company, the greatest thing I'd ever programmed was the curiosity and resilience in my son. As the applause died down, Marcus grabbed the microphone one last time. "I want to say something," he announced. "My dad's not between jobs. He's between victories, and I'm proud to be his son." The gymnasium erupted in applause again. In the back, I saw Serena and Richard having what appeared to be a heated discussion. Several parents were approaching her, no doubt with questions about how she'd hidden my success from the school community. Principal Morrison thanked everyone and began dismissing the assembly. Parents surrounded me with business cards and partnership proposals, but I only had eyes for Marcus. "Dad," he said quietly, as the crowd pressed around us, "why didn't you tell anyone? Why let Mom say those things?" I knelt down to his level, speaking just for him. "Because fighting with your mother would have hurt you. I knew the truth would come out eventually. Success speaks louder than arguments, and patience beats anger every time. Remember that." He nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Can I see the new house? The one being built?" "This weekend," I promised. "It has a coding lab just for you. And Marcus? It's not my house. It's our house. Your room is already designed. I used your sketches from last year, the ones with the rocket ship ceiling." His eyes widened. "You kept those?" "I kept everything," I said. "Every drawing, every report card, every little moment." Being between jobs just meant I had more time to plan our future. As we finally made our way out of the gymnasium, Principal Morrison stopped us. "Mr. Whitfield, the board would love to discuss further partnerships. Your vision for education technology aligns perfectly with our goals." "Have your people call my people," Marcus piped up, then blushed. "I mean, I laughed, ruffling his hair. "He's got it right. My assistant will set something up. But first, I think my son and I need to have a long overdue conversation about what comes next." We walked out together, past the clusters of amazed parents, past Serena and Richard's hushed argument, past the weight of 3 years of lies. In the parking lot, Marcus stopped at my Tesla, the one his mother had called a waste of money for someone who can't pay rent on time. "Dad," he said quietly, "I love you, and I'm sorry I believed. I'm sorry." "Never apologize for trusting your mother," I said. "That's what sons do. But now you know the truth, and that's what matters." As we drove away, I caught a glimpse in the rearview mirror of Serena standing in the parking lot, her phone pressed to her ear, probably calling her lawyer. Richard was nowhere to be seen, had likely slunk off to figure out how to spin this to his advantage. But none of that mattered anymore. Marcus was asking rapid-fire questions about the company, the technology, the future. His shame had transformed into pride, his distance into closeness. The career day that began with him mumbling about his unemployed father had ended with him standing tall beside the man he now knew I really was. "Hey, Dad," Marcus said, as we stopped at a red light. "Next career day, can I present about you? Like officially?" I smiled, thinking about all the career days to come, all the moments we'd share now that the truth had demolished the wall between us. "How about next time, we present together? As partners?" "Partners," he repeated, testing the word. Then, with a grin that was pure joy, "Thomas and Marcus Whitfield, changing the world. One line of code at a time," I agreed. And as we drove toward our future, our real future, built on truth instead of lies, presence instead of absence, I knew that of all the things I'd accomplished, this moment was worth more than any billion-dollar exit. The science wing would stand for generations, bearing Marcus's name. But the bridge rebuilt between father and son today, that was the real monument to what matters most. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying those who wronged you. Sometimes it's simply refusing to let them destroy what you love. And as Marcus chatted excitedly about showing me his latest coding project, I knew that this unemployed dad had just landed the only job that truly mattered, being his father again.
The acid ate through canvas like hunger. I stood in the garage watching 5 years of work dissolve into nothing while my sister Andrea held the empty bottle of drain cleaner like a trophy. "Oops," she said, not even trying to hide her smile. "Guess you'll have to cancel that interview." The fumes burned my eyes, but not as much as seeing my paintings melt. 43 pieces, every technique I'd mastered, every late night, every rejected meal because I was wasting time on doodles. The portrait of our grandmother that had taken 6 months. The landscape series that got me noticed by the Whitmore Gallery. The abstract collection I bled for. Literally, I'd mix my own blood into the reds after a particularly vicious family intervention about my delusions. All of it bubbling into toxic soup on the concrete floor. "Talent skips generations like you," Dad said from the doorway, arms crossed like he was watching justice being served. "This saves everyone the embarrassment of watching you fail publicly." "Better to fail now than embarrass us later," Mom added, stepping carefully around the spreading puddle of dissolved dreams. "The Whitmore Gallery, really, Grace? Did you think it wouldn't Google our family? Find out that your art comes from the same gene pool as your brother's addiction issues. My brother Tyler, dead 3 years from an overdose, still blamed for everything wrong in our family, even though he'd been the only one who'd ever supported my art. He'd bought my first real canvas with money he should have spent on groceries. Now they used his memory as a weapon against me. Andrea's starting her internship at the firm next week," Dad continued. "Real career, real future. We can't have you pulling focus with your finger painting nonsense." Andrea preened, tossing the empty acid bottle in the trash like it was just another piece of garbage. At 24, she'd never created anything but chaos. But she had the right look, the right smile, the right ability to mirror our parents' cruelty and call it ambition. "You're welcome," she said to me. "I saved you from humiliation. That gallery would have laughed you out of the room." I knelt beside the remains of my portfolio, touching the edge of what used to be my self-portrait. The acid hadn't reached all of it. One eye remained staring up at me from the wreckage. Accusing, asking why I hadn't protected it better. "Clean this up," Mom ordered, "and call the gallery. Tell them you've reconsidered, that you've decided to pursue something more appropriate for someone of your limitations." My limitations? I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I felt. "Don't play dumb," Andrea laughed. "The weird sister who talks to paintings, who thinks colors have feelings, who spent her college fund on art supplies. You're basically Tyler with a paintbrush instead of a needle." That's when I smiled. Not the broken smile they expected, not the defeated smile they'd seen 100 times before, but the smile of someone who'd just realized the cage door had been open all along. "You're right," I said, standing up. "I am like Tyler." They shifted uncomfortably. Mentions of Tyler that weren't accusations usually meant trouble. He saw the truth about this family. He just didn't know how to survive it. But I do. "Don't be dramatic," Mom started, but I cut her off. "Andrea, Remember when you plagiarized your entire senior thesis? When you paid Kevin Martinez to write it for you? I have the receipts, the Venmo transactions, the text messages where you brag about fooling your professors. Her face went white. You're lying. Mom, remember when you had that affair with Dad's business partner? The one that ended when his wife found out? I have the emails. The hotel receipts you hid in my art supply box because you thought I'd never clean it out. How dare you? Dad, remember the client money you borrowed to cover Andrea's sorority debts? The $50,000 that's still missing from the accounts. I have the bank statements, the forged signatures, the trail that leads right back to you. The garage fell silent except for the hissing of acid on concrete. You think I spent 5 years just painting? I asked. Tyler taught me something before he died. He said the only way to survive this family was to have insurance. He just never got to use his. You're bluffing, Andrea said, but her voice shook. I pulled out my phone, showing them the cloud folder labeled Family Archives. Subfolders for each of them, years of documentation. The Whitmore Gallery interview is at 2 tomorrow, I said calmly. I'll make it, because while you were destroying the portfolio you knew about, the real one was already there. Has been for a week. 50 pieces, my best work, including a series called Generational Trauma that I think you'd find familiar. You didn't, Mom gasped. Family portraits, I confirmed. Abstract, of course, but anyone who knows us would recognize the subjects. The mother drowning in wine glasses, the father counting money while his family burns, the golden daughter with her hollow crown, and the erased son, the ghost in every frame. That's our private. Nothing in this family is private, I interrupted. You made sure of that. Every failure broadcasted, every mistake cataloged, every weakness exploited. I just painted what I saw. We'll sue, Dad threatened. Defamation, theft of private information. With what money? The funds you embezzled? And sue me for what? Painting the truth. Besides, I thought talent skipped generations like me. What could I possibly create that would matter enough to sue over? Andrea lunged for my phone, but I stepped back, letting her slip in the acid puddle. She went down hard, shrieking as the diluted chemicals ate through her designer jeans. Careful, I said. That's evidence of destruction of property you're rolling in. Worth about $30,000, according to my insurance documentation. Yes, I insured my work. Yes, I have photos of everything before you destroyed it. Yes, the security cameras in the garage caught everything. I pointed to the camera they'd installed to make sure I wasn't stealing supplies from the garage. The one they'd forgotten about because watching me had become boring once I'd stopped fighting back. You planned this, Mom said, the truth dawning on her wine-flushed face. I prepared for this, I corrected. There's a difference. I hoped you'd surprise me. That maybe one of you would see my work and feel something other than threatened. But I knew better. Tyler knew better. He just loved you too much to use what he knew. Tyler was weak, Dad spat. Tyler was kind, I said. And you killed that kindness day by day until he had to numb himself to survive it. But I'm not Tyler. I'm not kind. I'm an artist. And artists don't just observe, we transform. I headed for the door, stepping carefully around the acid puddle where my old life dissolved. The interview's at 2. The opening, if they accept me, will be next month. You're not invited, but you'll hear about it. Everyone will. We'll destroy you, Andrea screamed, still trying to get the acid off her pants. We'll tell everyone you're crazy, that you're a liar. That I'm what? An artist who painted her truth? A daughter who documented her abuse? A sister who survived what her brother couldn't? Go ahead. Add to the series. I'll call it Extinction Burst, the final desperate thrashing of predators who've lost their prey. I left them in the garage with the fumes and a fury, packed my single suitcase, the one I'd kept ready for months. Everything important was already at the studio space I'd rented under a fake name, paid for with commissions they didn't know about. The Whitmore interview went better than I dreamed. Margaret Whitmore herself sat in, drawn by the portfolio I'd submitted. The Generational Trauma series made her assistant cry. The portrait of Tyler, painted from memory and grief, sold before I even officially joined the gallery. Your work has teeth, Margaret said. It doesn't just show pain, it transforms it. That's rare. I had good teachers, I said. They taught me that talent skips generations. They were right, it skipped their generation entirely. The opening was a month later. By then, the local news had picked up the story, not because I'd shared it, but because Andrea, in her infinite wisdom, had posted about destroying my art on Instagram, teaching my delusional sister a lesson about reality. The reality was 300 people at my opening, red dots on every piece within an hour, a write-up in Artforum that called the work devastating and necessary, commission requests from collectors who saw their own broken families in my broken canvases. My family tried to come. Security turned them away with printed copies of the restraining order I'd filed after they tried to break into my studio. They stood on the sidewalk, watching through the windows as strangers bought pain they'd inflicted, transformed into something they could never understand or claim. The piece that hurt them most wasn't the portraits. It was the one I painted the night they destroyed my portfolio. Phoenix in Acid, a self-portrait rising from a pool of dissolved canvas, every dissolved painting they destroyed visible in the wings. The catalog description read, "Sometimes destruction is just transformation wearing a disguise." It sold for more than Andrea's starting salary. The buyer? A collector whose own family had tried to destroy her dreams. She hung it in the lobby of her company, a tech firm worth billions, with a plaque, "For everyone who was told their talent skipped them." My family's response was predictable. Dad's embezzlement caught up with him when a forensic accountant hired by his firm after my story went viral found more missing funds. Andrea's plagiarism came out when Kevin Martinez, inspired by my courage, posted the receipts himself. Mom's affair reignited when the wife of her former lover recognized herself in one of my paintings and demanded answers. They fell like dominoes, each crash triggering the next. No dramatic confrontation needed. Just the natural consequence of their own actions, painted in acrylic and hung on gallery walls. I donated half the proceeds from that first show to addiction services in Tyler's name. The other half bought me a real studio, a real future, a real life where talent didn't skip me. It claimed me, filled me, saved me. 2 years later, I was preparing for my first museum show when a letter arrived. Andrea's handwriting, shaky and desperate. "I'm sorry. We're all sorry. Dad's in prison. Mom's in rehab. I lost everything. Please, we're family. Help us." I painted my response. Family portrait number 47, the empty frame. A massive canvas, entirely white except for the faint outline of figures that might have been there once. The museum hung it at the entrance with my artist's statement. Some erasures are acts of violence. Others are acts of grace. This is both. They were right that night in the garage. I didn't embarrass them later. I erased them completely. From my life, from my art, from my future. They exist now only as cautionary tales, dissolved in the acid of their own cruelty, while I rise from the chemicals they poured on my dreams. Talent skips generations. No, talent survives generations. It just sometimes has to paint its way out of the bloodline that tries to bury it. And somewhere, Tyler is painting too, finally free of the family that killed him for daring to feel too much in a house that felt too little. His portrait hangs in my living room, not the broken boy they remember, but the artist he could have been if acid hadn't come in the form of words before it came in bottles. I paint for him, for me, for everyone whose talent was called a skip when it was really a leap, away from those who'd rather destroy than celebrate the gifts they couldn't understand. The acid ate through canvas, but it couldn't touch what really mattered. The vision that saw beauty in the ruins, art in the ashes, and freedom in the flames. They threw acid on my art. I turned their acid into alchemy. They said talent skipped generations like me. They were wrong. Cruelty skipped generations. It just took me leaving to prove it. The music had just shifted to At Last by Etta James when I saw her. My stepsister Vanessa stood at the edge of the dance floor, and my stomach dropped. She wasn't supposed to be wearing white. Nobody wore white to a wedding except the bride. That was basic etiquette. But there she was in a flowing white gown that looked suspiciously like a wedding dress, complete with a small train that she kept adjusting for maximum visibility. "Is that?" my new husband Marcus whispered in my ear as we swayed. "Don't," I whispered back, forcing my smile to stay in place. "Just don't. Not today." But I knew Vanessa. I'd known her for 12 years, ever since my mom married her father when I was 14. She didn't do anything by accident. The white dress was a declaration of war. I should have seen this coming. The warning signs had been there all week, the mysterious smirks during the rehearsal dinner, The way she'd insisted on sitting at the table closest to the dance floor. The fact that she'd brought a plus one none of us had ever met. A photographer friend who kept taking pictures of her instead of the actual wedding party. "Sophie, you look absolutely radiant," my Aunt Martha had said earlier, squeezing my hand. "Don't let anything ruin this day for you." She glanced meaningfully at Vanessa, who was already working the room in her white gown, letting guests assume she was either part of the wedding party or possibly even another bride. I'd overheard her telling my cousin that it was a special dress for a special announcement. The song was barely halfway through when she started pushing through the crowd, her hand pressed dramatically against her stomach. Oh no. No, no, no. I knew that look. I'd seen it before, at my college graduation when she faked a fainting spell, at my engagement party when she'd announced her own engagement to a boyfriend of 2 weeks, at my mother's birthday when she claimed to have won the lottery. "Marcus," I whispered urgently, "she's going to." "Still PE music," Vanessa screamed, stumbling into the middle of the dance floor. The DJ, a young guy named Tyler who'd been nothing but professional all evening, looked confused but slowly faded the music out. 200 guests turned to stare as Vanessa positioned herself directly in the spotlight meant for our first dance. I caught Tyler's eye and saw something flicker across his face, recognition. He'd been setting up when I casually mentioned my concerns about certain family members causing drama. I'd even joked about Vanessa's history of attention-seeking behavior. He'd laughed and said he'd seen it all in his 5 years of wedding digging. "I'm so sorry," Vanessa gasped, one hand on her stomach, the other pressed to her forehead like a swooning Victorian maiden. I didn't want to steal the spotlight, but here it comes, I thought. Marcus's hand tightened around mine. I could feel the tension radiating from our wedding party. My maid of honor, Jessica, had actually taken a step forward like she was ready to physically intervene. "I'm Parisienne with TYNs," Vanessa wailed. "I just found out this morning and I couldn't keep it in anymore. I'm going to be a mommy." The guests erupted in confused murmurs. Some started clapping uncertainly. My Aunt Patricia, who'd have 4 glasses of champagne, actually cheered. But I noticed my mom's face had gone pale, and Vanessa's father, my stepfather Robert, looked like he'd been slapped. "Congratulations?" someone called out uncertainly. Vanessa basked in the attention, spinning so her white dress flared out. "I know it's Sophie's day, but when you get news this big, you just have to share it with family." I watched her performance with a mixture of fury and resignation. This was classic Vanessa. When I'd gotten into medical school, she'd announced she was writing a novel. When I'd gotten engaged, she'd suddenly been discovered by a modeling agency that turned out to be a scam. Every milestone in my life had to be accompanied by some dramatic announcement from her. "Vanessa," Robert started, his voice tight with embarrassment. "This isn't the time." "Oh, I know," she cried, actually twirling now. "I'm so sorry, Sophie. I just couldn't help myself. You know how emotional pregnancy makes you. And twins. Can you believe it? Twins." She was laying it on thick, even for her. The photographer friend was snapping pictures rapidly, probably for whatever social media storm Vanessa was planning later. "We should toast the happy news," Vanessa's best friend Brittany called out, clearly in on whatever this was. "To Vanessa and her twins." That's when Tyler the DJ did something I'll never forget. He leaned into his microphone, his voice cutting through the chaos with professional clarity. "Interesting timing, Vanessa." The room went quiet. Vanessa's tears topped mid-roll. "What?" she said, turning to face him. Tyler was already pulling out his phone, connecting it to the projection system we'd set up for the slideshow later. "I mean, it's interesting that you're announcing a pregnancy that you just found out about this morning." "Tyler," I breathed, not sure whether to stop him or let him continue. The wall behind the dance floor lit up with a social media post. Vanessa's profile. Posted 2 hours ago, right around the time we'd been taking pre-reception photos. "When you posted this," Tyler read aloud in a clear, news anchor voice. "Lol, can't wait to pull the fake pregnancy prank at my stepsis's wedding. She'll die when I steal her spotlight in this white dress. Hashtag prank queen, hashtag wedding crasher, hashtag twins fake bump." The silence was deafening. Someone dropped a champagne flute. The sound of it shattering seemed to echo forever. "That's," Vanessa sputtered, her face cycling through emotions rapidly. "That's not. Someone hacked my account." Tyler swiped to the next screenshot with the casual air of a prosecutor presenting evidence. And this one from last week. Bought the fake white dress for Sophie's wedding. She's gonna lose her mind. Building a fake bump with toilet paper as we speak. I heard gasps from the crowd. My grandmother muttered something in Italian that I'm pretty sure wasn't complimentary. Another swipe. Oh, and here's the tutorial you watched on how to fake a pregnancy announcement for maximum drama. You liked it and commented perfect for next Saturday. Stop, Vanessa screeched, lunging toward the DJ booth, but Tyler smoothly continued. Wait, there's more. Here's your Amazon order history. Another image appeared. Fake pregnancy belly, ordered Tuesday, 1-day shipping. And look, you left a review. Perfect for pranks. Looks so real. My mother stood up slowly from her table. Her face had gone from pale to a shade of red I'd never seen before. Vanessa Michelle Henderson. I'd never heard my mom use that tone. It was the voice she used exactly once before, when she caught my biological father cheating 15 years ago. Mom, I can explain, Vanessa started, but her voice was drowned out by the murmur of 200 wedding guests processing what they just witnessed. No, Robert interrupted, standing as well. His face showed a mixture of humiliation and fury. No more explaining, no more scenes, no more stunts. He turned to me and Marcus, and I saw tears in his eyes. Sophie, Marcus, I am deeply sorry. We should have addressed this behavior years ago. But Daddy, Vanessa tried again, her white dress now seeming more like a costume than a fashion choice. Now, Vanessa, we're leaving now. But Tyler wasn't done. As Vanessa was being escorted out by her mortified father, he called out cheerfully, Oh, and Vanessa. I screenshot everything. You know, in case you try to claim you really were pregnant later. I've sent copies to Sophie and your parents. Congratulations on the fake twins, though. You little. Vanessa spun around, but Robert physically pulled her toward the exit. Also, Tyler added, now clearly enjoying himself. That photographer you brought, he's been live streaming this whole thing. Hi, Kevin. He waved at the photographer, who looked like he wanted to sink into the floor. 20,000 viewers and counting. You're trending. The doors slammed behind them, the sound echoing through the ballroom. For a moment, nobody moved. Then my 85-year-old grandmother started slow clapping from her wheelchair. Best wedding entertainment I've seen in 60 years, she announced in her thick Italian accent. Better than when Cousin Lucia's wig caught fire in 72. The tension broke. People started laughing, then applauding. Tyler smoothly started the music back up, picking up at last right where we'd left off, as if nothing had happened. You okay? Marcus whispered as we resumed our positions. I looked around the room. My mother was pouring herself a large glass of wine but gave me a thumbs up. My bridesmaids were group hugging by the bar. My college friends were high-fiving Tyler, who was graciously accepting tips and business cards. Actually, I said, surprising myself. Yeah, I'm great. And I was. Because for the first time in 12 years, someone had finally called Vanessa out on her behavior. Not quietly, not privately, but in front of everyone she'd been trying to impress. The rest of the reception was magical. Without Vanessa's toxic energy, people relaxed and actually enjoyed themselves. My mom even made an impromptu toast, apologizing for the interruption and praising Tyler as the hero we didn't know we needed. She also announced that family therapy would be starting immediately for those who needed it, which got a knowing laugh from the crowd. During dinner, people kept approaching our table with stories of their own about Vanessa. My cousin revealed she'd worn white to her wedding too. My college roommate mentioned the time Vanessa had faked a broken leg at my graduation party. It was like a dam had broken. Everyone finally felt free to acknowledge what we'd all been politely ignoring for years. How did Tyler even know to screenshot that stuff? Marcus asked during our father-daughter dance. My stepfather had graciously offered to step in for my late father. I grinned. I may have mentioned to him during setup that my stepsister had a history of causing scenes. Told him to keep an eye on social media, just in case. Didn't actually think he would. Remind me to tip him extra, Marcus laughed. Later, as I was touching up my makeup in the bathroom, a group of guests I didn't recognize approached me. We're Vanessa's coworkers, one woman explained. We just wanted to say we're sorry for what happened, but also, thank you. She pulls this stuff at work too. Maybe now she'll finally get help. As the night went on, Tyler became something of a celebrity. He told the story of how he'd noticed Vanessa's posts while scrolling during a break, how he'd immediately started screenshotting everything, how he even found her Amazon review through her public wish list. "I've been doing this for 5 years," he explained to an eager crowd. "You develop a sixth sense for drama." Plus, Sophie mentioned her concerns, so I set up some Google alerts. The Amazon thing was just lucky. She'd shared her wish list on Facebook last month. But the real vindication came at the end of the night. As Marcus and I were leaving for our honeymoon, Tyler pulled me aside. "Hey, so full disclosure," he said. "I do social media monitoring for a lot of events now. Started after a birthday party disaster last year. Your stepsister's not the first person to try the fake pregnancy thing." "Really?" "Oh yeah, it's like a trending thing now. How to upstage the bride. There are whole forums dedicated to it. Reddit threads, TikTok tutorials, the works." He shook his head. "But posting about it beforehand? Using your real name? That's just amateur hour." He handed me a USB drive. "Everything's on here. Screenshots, timestamps, even the metadata proving they're real. The live stream recording too. In case she tries anything else." I looked at the small drive in my hand. Why go to all this trouble? Tyler's expression softened. My sister's wedding got ruined by a narcissistic relative. Nobody stood up for her. She never got her perfect day back. He smiled. "Besides, it's your wedding. You deserve to have your first dance." And honestly, it was really satisfying to watch her face when I pulled up those screenshots. As our car pulled away from the venue, my phone was already buzzing with notifications. "Mom, I'm so sorry, honey. Robert and I are having a serious talk about Vanessa's behavior. This was the last straw. We're looking into treatment programs. My bridesmaid, OMG Tyler, is a Lee G and got his card for my wedding." Unknown number. "Hi Sophie, this is Tyler's girlfriend. That video has 50K views already. Vanessa's wedding crashing days are over. Congrats on your marriage. College friend, your wedding is trending on Twitter. #FakeBumpgate." I turned my phone off and snuggled closer to Marcus. Vanessa had tried to ruin my wedding with a fake pregnancy in a white dress. Instead, she'd given me the best gift possible: freedom from ever having to pretend her behavior was acceptable again. 6 months later, I received a letter from Vanessa. She was in therapy, had moved 3 states away, and was working on herself. She apologized, a real apology, not her usual manipulation. She mentioned that seeing herself on that projection screen, having her lies displayed for everyone to see, had been her rock bottom. I didn't respond. Some bridges, once burned, don't need rebuilding. Tyler, on the other hand, became wedding DJ famous. He started a side business in event security, basically monitoring social media for potential wedding and party crashers. He even gave a TED talk, Screenshots and Solidarity: How Social Media Can Protect Your Special Day. And the video? It became a viral sensation, spawning countless memes and even a few copycat exposures at other weddings. Vanessa inadvertently started a movement of DJs and wedding planners taking a more proactive approach to managing disruptive guests. My wedding video is beautiful. There's a brief moment of chaos in the middle, sure. But what most people remember is the sight of Tyler the DJ, calmly destroying a narcissist with nothing but screenshots and a projector, while the bride and groom continued their first dance. It wasn't the wedding I planned. It was better. Because it was the wedding where I finally stopped being afraid of Vanessa's stunts, where my family finally saw her true colors, and where a DJ named Tyler became a legend. And yes, I kept the USB drive. Not because I planned to use it, but as a reminder. Sometimes the best response to someone trying to steal your spotlight is to let them, and make sure everyone can see exactly what they're doing in the light. The Country Club's ballroom hadn't changed in 20 years. Same crystal chandeliers, same burgundy carpet, same smell of old money and new prejudices. I stood near the coat check, watching my extended family mingle at our decade reunion, their laughter echoing off walls that had witnessed every milestone and humiliation of my childhood. "Maya, is that you?" Aunt Patricia's voice cut through the chatter. "My goodness, you look professional." Professional, code for boring. I smoothed my simple black dress, the same one I'd worn to close a $3 million deal last week. "Hi, Aunt Pat. Are you still doing that little secretary job?" She peered at me over her glasses. "Your mother mentioned you work at some startup." "I work in tech," I said simply. "Oh, how modern. Answering phones must be so different now with all those computers. She patted my arm. Don't worry, dear. Not everyone can be a success like your sister. Across the room, my sister Vanessa held court near the bar, her designer dress catching the light as she gestured animatedly. Our cousins hung on every word, their faces alight with admiration. Vanessa had always been the star, prettier, louder, better at commanding attention. While I'd spent college nights coding, she'd spent them networking. While I built algorithms, she built her Instagram following. There's my baby sister. Vanessa's voice rang out as she spotted me. The crowd parted as she sashayed over, wine glass in hand, engagement ring flashing. Everyone, Maya's here. My little worker bee. The familiar sting of condescension washed over me. Worker bee. That's what she called me since high school, when I'd stayed up late doing homework while she went to parties. How's the receptionist life? She air-kissed my cheek, leaving a lipstick mark I knew was intentional. Still fetching coffee for those tech bros? I don't fetch coffee, I said quietly. Sure you don't. She winked at our gathered relatives. My sister's always been so serious. While she's been typing away at her little desk, I've been building an empire. An empire? Cousin Josh leaned in, interested. What kind of business? Vanessa's smile widened. She'd been waiting for this opening. Oh, just a small venture that's grown beyond my wildest dreams. We're disrupting the entire beauty industry with AI-powered skincare matching. My stomach dropped. She was describing my company. AI-powered. Aunt Patricia gasped. Vanessa, how innovative. I'd be UILTA on dollar company. Meister steer barged 8-hour reunion. It's been featured in Vogue, Allure, even TechCrunch. We just closed our Series B funding at a $50 million valuation. She was quoting my investor deck verbatim. The same deck I practiced in my apartment mirror 100 times before pitching to Sequoia Capital. Unlike Maya, who just enhanced the vigorous Pavtomies. She glanced at me with false sympathy. But someone has to do the small jobs, right? Not everyone can be an entrepreneur. EVER won't lapid. The sound was deafening. My family, the people who'd watched me grow up, who'd seen me win science fairs and coding competitions, applauded my sister for stealing my life's work. Uncle Robert whistled. Cousin Sandra raised her glass in a toast. Even my mother, standing near the dessert table, smiled proudly at her eldest daughter. Tell us more. Aunt Patricia gushed. How did you come up with such a brilliant idea? Vanessa launched into the story, my story. The late nights teaching myself machine learning. The failed prototypes. The moment I'd realized we could use computer vision to analyze skin conditions. She told it all as if she lived it, adding flourishes about boardroom negotiations and celebrity endorsements that were painfully accurate, because she'd been reading my emails. 3 months ago, she asked to crash at my apartment after a fight with her ex. I'd given her my spare key, my Wi-Fi password, my trust. She'd stayed for 2 weeks, and I'd been too busy with the Forbes interview to notice her unusual interest in my work laptop. Maya, you must be so proud of your sister. Uncle Robert clapped me on the shoulder. Maybe she can get you a real job at her company. I opened my mouth to respond, but what could I say? That the company they were celebrating was mine, that I'd spent 5 years building it from nothing? That the $1 million company was actually valued at $50 million, and I owned 60%. They'd never believe me. Vanessa had always been the golden child, the one who succeeded, the one whose stories were automatically credible. I was just the quiet sister who worked with computers. I need some air, I mumbled, heading for the exit. Oh, Maya, don't go. Vanessa called after me, voice dripping with false concern. I was just about to tell them about our new office in Palo Alto. 40 employees and growing. 43 employees, actually. I'd hired the last 3 personally. I pushed through the heavy doors into the cool evening air, my hands shaking with rage and something else. Disappointment, not just in Vanessa, but in myself for being surprised. She'd taken credit for my achievements our whole lives. My science fair project became her inspiration. My valedictorian speech included ideas she'd suggested. I'd always let it slide, telling myself it didn't matter who got credit as long as the work got done. But this was different. This was my company, my vision, my entire adult life. My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel Chin, my co-founder and CTO. Running late to your family thing. Traffic on 101 is brutal. Do you still need me to bring the magazine? The magazine. In the chaos of Vanessa's performance, I'd almost forgotten. The Forbes 30 Under 30 issue had hit stands today, featuring a 4-page spread on our company. Daniel had insisted on framing the cover for the office. I texted back, "Actually, yes. Bring it." 20 minutes. I had 20 minutes to decide if I wanted to go back in there and expose Vanessa's lies. 20 minutes to choose between keeping the peace and claiming my truth. I spent them sitting on a bench outside, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of purple and gold. The same sky I'd watched from my office window during countless late nights, building the company my sister was now claiming as her own. My phone lit up with notifications. The reunion's Facebook page was already flooding with posts. So proud of Vanessa, beauty and brains. The Patel family's success story. Then one that made me laugh bitterly. Maya must be so inspired by her amazing sister. Then, KEDOROPNED. Daniel Chen strode into the ballroom like he owned it, which, considering his 15% stake in the company, he partially did. 6'2", wearing the same Patagonia vest he'd worn to our IPO meetings, carrying a framed magazine cover under one arm and radiating the confidence of someone who'd helped build something extraordinary. The room seemed to pause as he scanned the crowd. His eyes found mine immediately. "Sorry, I am late. COFOUNDER." His voice carried across the ballroom with the same clarity he used in board presentations. Every head turned. Vanessa, mid-story about her latest product launch, froze with her mouth open. Daniel walked straight to me, ignoring everyone else. Traffic was murder, but I couldn't miss the chance to celebrate with the actual CEO of Beauty Mind I. He handed me a Forbes magazine with my face on it. "They did a great job with the cover, Maya, though they should have mentioned your second patent." The magazine cover showed me in my office, surrounded by screens displaying our AI algorithms. The headline read, "Maya Patel, the 28-year-old genius revolutionizing skincare with artificial intelligence." Sister's wine glass shattered. The sound of breaking crystal cut through the silence. Red wine spread across the burgundy carpet like blood. Vanessa stood frozen, her hand still positioned as if holding the glass, her face cycling through emotions: shock, rage, fear. "I'm sorry," Daniel said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "Did I interrupt something?" He looked around innocently. "I heard someone talking about Beauty Mind when I walked in. It's always surreal hearing people discuss our baby." He draped an arm around my shoulders. 5 years of blood, sweat, and Maya's brilliant algorithms, and now everyone wants to claim they knew us when. Aunt Patricia was the first to speak, her voice faint. "Maya, you're the CEO." "Co-founder and CEO," Daniel confirmed cheerfully. "I handle the technical infrastructure, but Maya's the visionary. The AI skincare matching, her idea. The computer vision algorithms, she coded the first version herself. The celebrity endorsements, she negotiated every single one." He grinned. "I still remember when she called me at 3 a.m. with the breakthrough that became our core patent." I found my voice. Daniel's being modest. "He built our entire cloud infrastructure from scratch." "While you built the company," he countered. Then, as if just noticing Vanessa, he tilted his head. "I'm sorry, have we met? You look familiar." Vanessa's face had gone pale beneath her makeup. "I'm Maya's sister." "Oh, the Instagram influencer." Recognition dawned on Daniel's face. "Maya mentioned you stayed with her last month. Did you enjoy the office tour? Most people find our algorithm demonstrations pretty boring." The trap was perfectly laid. If Vanessa claimed she'd never seen the office, her earlier stories would collapse. If she admitted to the tour, she'd be acknowledging that everything she knew came from me. I think there's been a misunderstanding," she stammered. "A misunderstanding." My mother finally spoke, moving away from the dessert table. "Vanessa, you said you built $1 million company." 50 million actually, Daniel corrected helpfully. "Well, 52 million as of our last valuation. Though if the Estee Lauder acquisition goes through, we're looking at." He caught my warning glance. "But I'm getting ahead of myself." Uncle Robert picked up the magazine with trembling hands. There I was, featured in Forbes, in the same publication that had featured Gates and Jobs and Zuckerberg. The article's pull quote was highlighted in yellow. "Maya Patel represents the future of tech, brilliant, driven, and refreshingly authentic." This is real. He looked between me and Vanessa. Maya, you built this. She built it, Daniel confirmed before I could downplay my role. I've worked with founders from MIT, Stanford, Harvard. Maya outworks and outthinks them all. Do you know she taught herself machine learning from YouTube videos? That she built our first prototype in her studio apartment? That she pitched 47 investors before getting our first yes? The room was silent except for the sound of wine dripping from the broken glass onto the carpet. Why didn't you say anything? Cousin Sandra asked me. I looked at my family, really looked at them. At their shocked faces, their inability to reconcile the quiet girl they dismissed with the success story in Forbes. At my mother, who'd never once asked about my work. At Vanessa, whose entire identity had been built on being the successful sister. Would you have believed me? I asked simply. The silence that followed was answer enough. Daniel squeezed my shoulder. We should go. The team's waiting at the office to celebrate. Real celebration with people who actually know what you've accomplished. He paused. Though if anyone wants to hear about the real Beauty Mind story, Mai is giving a keynote at TechCrunch Disrupt next month. I think there are still tickets available. I let him lead me toward the door, then stopped. Vanessa stood alone by the shattered glass, her designer dress now stained with wine, her carefully constructed image in ruins. Vanessa, I called out. She looked up, tears threatening her mascara. The offer still stands. If you want to learn about what I actually do, you're welcome to visit. The real office, not the version you created. Her face crumbled. Maya, I know, I said quietly. You've always needed to be the star. But stealing someone else's light doesn't make you shine brighter. We left them there, my family surrounding the Forbes magazine like archaeologists discovering proof of an ancient civilization. In the parking lot, Daniel finally let out the laugh he'd been holding. That felt good, he admitted. Watching you let them dismiss you these past years has been painful. I thought it didn't matter, I said, settling into his Tesla. I thought the work would speak for itself. It does, he said, pulling onto the highway. But sometimes you need to be the one speaking for it. Your sister understood that, even if she understood nothing else. My phone buzzed incessantly as we drove. Texts from family members, suddenly interested in my life. Suddenly proud of their CEO niece/cousin/daughter. I turned it off. You okay? Daniel asked. I thought about it. My sister had tried to steal my life's work. My family had believed her. For a few horrible moments, my entire identity had been erased by someone who'd never written a line of code or pitched a single investor. But she failed. The truth had a way of surfacing, especially when you built something real. Every line of code, every patent, every employee who joined our mission, they were testimony to what I actually accomplished. I'm better than okay, I said, watching the city lights blur past. I'm finally visible. Daniel grinned. Good. Because the team really is waiting to celebrate, and unlike your family, they actually know what we're celebrating. As we pulled into the Beauty Man parking lot, I saw our logo illuminated against the building, my vision made tangible. Inside, 43 people who'd believed in that vision were waiting to toast the Forbes feature with someone who'd earned it. My phone buzzed one last time before I shut it off completely. A text from Vanessa. I'm sorry, I just wanted to be like you. I stared at the words, then deleted them. She'd never wanted to be like me. She'd wanted to be me without understanding that being me meant years of rejection, isolation, and bone-deep exhaustion. It meant choosing the work over the party, the algorithm over the accolades, the truth over the comfortable lie. Coming? Daniel stood by the office door, holding it open. I pocketed my phone and walked into my real life, the one I built, line by line, failure by failure, victory by quiet victory. Behind me, the door closed on a family who finally learned my name. It only took a Forbes cover to make them remember it. My name is Elena, and I'm about to tell you a story that sounds like it belongs in a soap opera. But I swear every word is true. It's about betrayal, family secrets, and how a simple DNA test can unravel decades of lies in the most spectacular way possible. The Whitmore farm has been in our family for 4 generations. My great-grandfather bought the original 200 acres in 1924 with money he'd saved working in the coal mines. Over the decades, the farm grew to 800 acres of prime agricultural land in Kentucky, complete with century-old barns, fertile fields, and a farmhouse that had sheltered 4 generations of our family. I grew up on that farm alongside my older sister Meredith. We were only 2 years apart, but we couldn't have been more different. I was the one who loved getting my hands dirty, helping Dad with the livestock, learning about crop rotation and soil management. Meredith was always more interested in fashion magazines and talking about how she couldn't wait to leave the boring farm life behind. Our parents, Robert and Helen Whitmore, worked that land with the kind of dedication that only comes from genuine love. Dad would be out in the fields before sunrise, and Mom managed the household while keeping detailed records of every expense, every harvest, every decision that affected our family's legacy. When I graduated high school, I went to agricultural college but came home every summer to work the farm. Meredith went to university in Louisville and rarely visited, except when she needed money. She graduated with a business degree and moved to Atlanta, where she worked in marketing for a tech company. For years, she barely called, except around Christmas or when she wanted to complain about how backward our hometown was. I, on the other hand, moved back home after college and became Dad's full partner in running the farm. I modernized our equipment, implemented sustainable farming practices, and even started a small organic vegetable operation that supplied local restaurants. The farm was thriving under our joint management. Then 5 years ago, everything changed. Dad suffered a massive stroke while checking on the cattle one morning. I found him collapsed in the pasture and rode with him in the ambulance, holding his hand as he struggled to breathe. He survived, but the stroke left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. Mom became his full-time caregiver, and I took over the day-to-day operations of the farm. Suddenly, Meredith was very interested in family affairs again. She started visiting more frequently, always with some excuse about wanting to help during this difficult time. But I noticed she spent most of her visits in Dad's office, going through paperwork and asking Mom detailed questions about the farm's finances and legal structure. "I'm just trying to understand how everything works," she'd say when I questioned her. "I want to be prepared to help if something happens." I was too busy keeping the farm running and too worried about Dad's health to pay much attention to her sudden interest. Looking back, I should have been more suspicious. Dad passed away 2 years later, peacefully in his sleep. Mom was devastated, and I was heartbroken. We held a beautiful funeral in the little church where 4 generations of Whitmores had worshipped. The entire community came to pay their respects to a man who had been a pillar of our rural county. After the funeral, I expected we'd sit down as a family to discuss Dad's will and the future of the farm. I knew from conversations over the years that Dad intended to leave the farm to both Meredith and me, though I assumed I'd have the option to buy her out since she'd never shown any interest in actually farming. But a week after the funeral, Meredith asked to speak with me privately. "Elena," she said, her voice unusually serious, "I need to tell you something about Dad's will." She handed me a legal document that made my blood run cold. According to the paperwork, Dad had revised his will 6 months before his death, leaving the entire farm to Meredith alone. I was to receive only $50,000 and some personal items. "This can't be right," I stammered, reading the document over and over. "Dad would never." "I'm sorry, Elena, but Dad was worried about your ability to handle the business side of things. He thought I'd be better equipped to make the tough financial decisions." Meredith's voice was gentle, but her eyes were cold. "He did mention that you could stay on as a farm manager if you wanted. I'd pay you a fair salary." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. A farm manager? On my own family's land? "I want to see the original will," I said. "I want to talk to Dad's lawyer." "Mr. Henderson retired last year," Meredith replied smoothly. "Dad used a new attorney in Louisville for this revision. Everything's been filed with the probate court already." The next few months were a nightmare. I contested the will, but Meredith's attorney, a slick Louisville firm, presented documentation that seemed ironclad. They had witness signatures, notarization, everything needed for a valid will. My rural lawyer, while honest and hardworking, was outmatched by their resources and expertise. Meanwhile, Meredith began making changes to the farm. She hired a property management company from Atlanta and started talking about maximizing the land's potential. When I objected to some of her decisions, she reminded me that I was now just an employee. "I'm trying to modernize this operation, Elena. Dad's way of doing things was outdated. We need to think bigger." The final straw came when she announced plans to sell 400 acres to a development company that wanted to build a shopping center. 400 acres of land that our great-grandfather had bought with his own blood and sweat, that 3 generations of Whitmores had carefully cultivated, was going to become a parking lot. "You can't do this," I pleaded. "This land is our family's legacy." "My family's legacy," she corrected. "And legacies don't pay the bills, Elena. This development deal will set us up for life." That night, alone in the old farmhouse that no longer felt like home, I made a decision. I was going to fight this, no matter what it took. I started by hiring a private investigator named Jake Morrison, a former police detective who specialized in document fraud cases. Jake was expensive, but I used every penny of my savings and took out loans against my truck and personal property to pay him. "There's something off about this whole situation," Jake told me after reviewing the case. "Your sister hadn't shown interest in the farm for years, then suddenly she's the sole heir. And the timing of this whole revision, just months before your father's stroke, seems convenient." Jake began investigating the witnesses who had supposedly signed Dad's revised will. The first witness was a notary in Louisville who claimed to remember Dad coming to her office. But when Jake pressed her for details, her story started falling apart. "She described your father as a tall, heavy-set man with gray hair," Jake reported back to me. "But your father was short and thin, and he'd been completely bald since his cancer treatment 15 years ago." The second witness was even more problematic. The address on the will matched a building that had been demolished 8 months before the supposed signing date. But Jake's most important discovery came when he analyzed the paper and ink used for the will. The document was supposedly created 6 months before Dad's death, but the paper showed watermarks from a batch that wasn't manufactured until 2 months after Dad had already passed away. "Elena," Jake said, his voice grim, "this will is a complete fabrication. Your sister didn't just revise your father's will, she created an entirely fake document." I felt vindicated but also sick. My own sister had committed felony fraud to steal our family's farm. But I needed more evidence to prove it in court, and Meredith's lawyers were skilled at deflecting our accusations. That's when Jake suggested something that seemed completely unrelated to the case. "Elena, I want you to consider taking a DNA test, one of those ancestry kits you can order online." I stared at him. How was my ancestry going to help with the will case? "Just trust me on this one. There's something about your sister's behavior that's been bothering me. The way she talks about her family legacy. The way she seems so confident that she deserves everything. It reminds me of other cases I've worked where family dynamics weren't what they appeared to be." I thought it was a waste of time, but I was desperate. I ordered a DNA kit online and sent in my sample, figuring it couldn't hurt to have more information about our family history. The results came back 3 weeks later, and they changed everything. According to the DNA analysis, I had several genetic matches with other users in the database. But when I looked at the matches more carefully, I realized something shocking. None of my closest genetic relatives have the surname Whitmore. Instead, my strongest matches were with people named Rodriguez, Martinez, and Gonzalez. I called Jake immediately, my hands shaking as I held the printed results. "Jake, I think there's been a mistake with my DNA test. It says my closest relatives are Hispanic families, but where?" "Elena," Jake interrupted gently, "what if there wasn't a mistake? What if the test is telling us exactly what we need to know?" That afternoon, I drove to the county courthouse and pulled every birth certificate, marriage license, and adoption record I could find for our family. What I discovered made my head spin. My birth certificate showed that I was born Elena Rodriguez, not Elena Whitmore. I had been adopted by Robert and Helen Whitmore when I was 6 months old. My biological parents were Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, migrant farm workers who had been killed in a car accident. But here's the part that destroyed Meredith's entire scheme. There was no adoption record for her. Meredith Whitmore was Robert and Helen's biological daughter. I was their adopted daughter. But under Kentucky adoption law, adopted children have the same inheritance rights as biological children. More importantly, I found Dad's real will in the courthouse records, the one he had filed with his longtime lawyer, Mr. Henderson, before Henderson retired. In that will, Dad explicitly stated that both his daughters, biological and adopted, were to inherit the farm equally. He had even included specific language about how much had meant to him and how proud he was of my dedication to the family farm. The fake will Meredith had created conveniently made no mention of my adoption, instead painting the inheritance decision as purely based on business capabilities. When I called Jake with the news, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Elena, your sister didn't just commit fraud. She tried to use your adoption against you, probably hoping you'd never find out the truth about your parentage. She counted on you not knowing your legal rights as an adopted child." The confrontation came a week later. I met Meredith at the farm, in Dad's old office where she'd been spending so much time during his illness. She was sitting behind his desk, like she owned the place, which, according to her fake will, she did. "Meredith," I said, placing the DNA results and courthouse documents on the desk in front of her, "we need to talk." Her face went white as she saw the papers. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, she looked genuinely scared. "I don't know what you think those prove," she said, but her voice was shaking. "They prove that you forged Dad's will. They prove that you knew I was adopted and tried to use it against me. And they prove that you've been planning this fraud for years." Meredith stood up abruptly, knocking over Dad's coffee mug. "You don't understand, Elena. I am his real daughter. I carry his blood. This farm should be mine." "You're right," I said quietly. "You are his biological daughter. But I'm his daughter too. The daughter who stayed. The daughter who learned everything he had to teach. The daughter who held his hand when he was dying while you were in Atlanta worried about your marketing campaigns." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I never meant for it to go this far. I panicked when I saw the real will. You were getting half of everything, and you're not even really family." "Not really family." I stood up, my voice rising. "I worked this land for 20 years. I sacrificed my own dreams to keep Dad's legacy alive. I took care of him when he was sick and Mom when she was grieving. If that doesn't make me family, then what does?" "Blood," she whispered. "Blood makes you family." I looked at her with a mixture of pity and disgust. "Dad didn't choose you, Meredith. You were just an accident of biology. But he chose me. He and Mom chose to make me their daughter, chose to love me, chose to teach me everything they knew about this land. That choice, that love, that's worth more than any DNA test." The legal resolution was swift once we had the evidence. Meredith's forged will was thrown out, and Dad's real will was validated. She was charged with fraud, forgery, and attempted theft of property. Her fancy Atlanta lawyers couldn't explain away the physical evidence of the fake documents. But the most satisfying moment came during the settlement hearing, when Meredith's attorney tried to argue that as the biological daughter, she deserved preference in the inheritance. Judge Williams, who had known our family for decades, looked at the lawyer with barely concealed disgust. "Counselor, this court recognizes no difference between biological and adopted children when it comes to inheritance rights. Elena Rodriguez Whitmore has been a member of this family for 34 years. She has worked this land, cared for her parents, and honored their legacy. The fact that she was chosen rather than born into this family makes her sacrifice and dedication even more remarkable." He turned to Meredith, his voice stern. "Ms. Whitmore, your father left you a generous inheritance, half of one of the most valuable farms in this county. But that wasn't enough for you, was it? You had to have it all. And you were willing to commit felony fraud to get it. Your actions have brought shame on the Whitmore name and dishonor to your father's memory." Meredith received 5 years of probation and was ordered to pay restitution for the legal costs and emotional distress she had caused. More importantly, she was forced to honor Dad's real will, which meant I owned half the farm and had the legal right to buy her out if she wanted to sell her portion. She took the buyout option immediately. I think the shame of what she'd done, combined with the community's reaction to her fraud, made it impossible for her to stay in our small town. She moved back to Atlanta and, as far as I know, never returned to Kentucky. I used part of the insurance money from the farm to pay off all the legal fees and Jake's investigator costs. The rest I invested back into the land, upgrading equipment, and expanding our organic operations. But the most important change was what I did with the knowledge about my biological family. Using the DNA matches and courthouse records, I was able to connect with some of my biological relatives, cousins and aunts who were thrilled to discover I existed. They told me stories about my birth parents, Carlos and Maria, and how heartbroken their families had been when they died so young. It turns out Carlos had been a gifted farmer who had dreamed of owning his own land someday. Maria had been known for her beautiful garden and her way with animals. When I share photos of the Whitmore farm with my newly discovered relatives, my biological aunt cried. "Mija," she said, "your father would be so proud. You became everything he dreamed of being." I invited my biological family to visit the farm, and many of them came for a reunion that summer. It was emotional and wonderful to meet people who shared my features, my mannerisms, even my love of working with my hands. But what struck me most was how graciously they accepted my adoptive family as their own. "The Whitmores chose to love you when you needed a family," my biological uncle told me. "That makes them our family too." Today, the farm is more successful than ever. I've married a wonderful man named David who shares my passion for sustainable agriculture, and we're raising our 2 young children to understand and respect the land that 4 generations have called home. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't taken that DNA test. Would Meredith have gotten away with her fraud? Would I have spent the rest of my life believing I was somehow less worthy of my father's love because I wasn't his biological daughter? But then I remember what Dad used to say when I was little and would ask about being adopted. "Elena, some kids get one family by accident. You got 2 families on purpose, the one that gave you life and the one that chose to love you. That makes you twice as lucky as most people." He was right. I am twice as lucky. I got to inherit not just land and property, but 2 family legacies, the Rodriguez tradition of hard work and determination, and the Whitmore commitment to the land and community. Meredith thought she could use my adoption against me, make me feel like an outsider with no claim to our family's heritage. Instead, she helped me discover that I belonged to something even bigger and more beautiful than she could ever understand. The farm is still called Whitmore Farm, and it always will be. But now there's a small garden near the farmhouse where I grow the vegetables my biological mother loved. Tomatoes, peppers, and cilantro that connect me to another heritage. Another story of people who loved the land and believed in the power of family. Blood doesn't make a family, love does. Choice does. Commitment does. And no amount of fraud or forgery can ever change that truth. The Rodriguez Whitmore farm is thriving, and it will continue to thrive for generations to come, nurtured by the best of both families that made me who I am today.